All right, on my clock, it is now 3 Central, meaning it's 4 Eastern, and I'm not going to do the conversion to Pacific time. Sorry, everyone. But welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be presenting Unraveling the Mystery of AAC, the Right to Communicate. We'll do a little more formal introduction, but I'm Heather Prenovo, and I'm joined by the wonderful.
I'm Megan Coons. So lovely to
uh,
be here with you all. We're really excited to share this content with you.
Perfect. We are going to turn our webcams off just to save on bandwidth. And if you're just logging in and want to share out, we've been just chatting about where everybody's joining from, and we will get started. All right. So, as we mentioned, today is part one of our series of trainings on the AAC consideration process, entitled Unraveling the Mystery of AAC. And we're going to start out with this idea around the right to communicate. And let
So as I
Megan do her intro.
mentioned, my name is Megan Coons, and I'm the regional consultant and augmentative communication consultant here in Minnesota. So Heather and I work pretty closely together in the state. I'm going into my 17th year of AAC, my 5th year with PRC. We hope to just share our passion really with you today on AAC as we kind of look through this lens of the consideration process. My financial disclosure is that I am an employee owner of PRC Saltillo because PRC Saltillo is employee owned. And I look forward to walking you guys through the next couple days through this lens.
Awesome. And then I am Heather Prenovo, as I mentioned. I'm an SLP and AAC consultant for Saltillo here in Minnesota, and I also support Wisconsin. As you see on the slides, we are just going to be talking about PRC Saltillo products and applications as it applies to this process, but then the overall information, strategies, tools are applicable to AAC. My disclosures are I am also an employee owner of PRC Saltillo. Non-financial, I'm an ASHA member, a SIG 12 member, a MNSHA member, and a MNSHA AAC committee member. And I just realized once Megan said how long she's been doing AAC, so this is my 20th year in working with AAC. I worked for the schools for 17 of those years and have been with PRC Saltillo for the last 3 years. So welcome. And we are going to launch a poll in just a second where you're going to be able to click on the screen, but we wanted to kind of talk about what your options are, about why you're here today and why we're doing this. So I'm going to let Megan talk while I launch.
All right. So we would love to know kind of why you're joining us today. When you saw the information for this training, kind of like what brought you here? What questions do you have in your head? I'll read through a couple of these answers as you guys work on your responses, but number one would be, I'm not sure how AAC could help my child or help my student or client. You might also be here because you're worried about the fact that a child or a student is not currently talking or that their speech is hard to understand. Maybe you've heard that your child is too young to start AAC and you're wondering a little bit more about that and want to know maybe some of the research behind that. Or maybe you're not sure if your child or student has the skills to use a speech generating device. If why you're here today is not listed, we'd love to kind of know your feedback on this too. So please feel free to go ahead and click in that chat window and let us know your reason why you're here.
We'll give you some time to type if you are wanting to share your other reason with us. I see Angela put in AAC resources. Perfect. We will be sharing lots of those over the next couple days. Training as an AAC specialist. Perfect. More resources. More familiar with resources. Perfect. Learn from the masters. I don't know about that, but we will share what we do have. Perfect. We are glad that it sounded like good information. This is good. Oh, so good.
Yes.
I love all of your responses. All right, we are going to close out the poll, but thank you guys, and we're going to share out what you guys clicked on. So we had a couple of people who said that they're here for reason one, that not sure how to help with AAC. Some that were, I'm worried about them not talking yet. Some have heard that, oh, my child's too young to start using AAC and wanting to know more about if that's true. Some said, I'm not sure if they have the skills to start using AAC. So that's always a valid question too. And then the majority said other, and you guys shared out some great reasons why, mainly being you want to learn more, which I think we can all say in our jobs. We constantly want to seek out more information. So thank you for joining us, and we hope the information we share is helpful for you as you continue on this AAC journey.
Just a brief breakdown of why we're here today. We'll take a peek at our agenda here next. The first things that we're going to do is just kind of set up some of that background information. So what is AAC, what is language, and what is communication? Heather's going to review those with you so that we all have that same kind of background knowledge as we dive a little bit deeper over the next couple days if you're attending today or if you're attending the full workshop series. We're then going to go over some of the common myths. I think it's very common in our field that we hear some of these myths, and sometimes we don't always know what information to provide or what resources can you provide to a family that helps guide them forward in the process. So we're certainly going to go take a closer look at the myths and the beliefs out there about AAC, dive into those communicative competencies, look at next steps, and talk a little bit more about what information we're going to review in the second and the third training in the series, and certainly answer your questions as we go through. As we go through today and the next 2 days, you will find these little icons on various slides as we're presenting. This is kind of your cheat sheet to let you know that if you see the notes handout there, it does correlate to some of the information that was found in the materials tab. So there is a place that you can document if you're a note taker and that helps you retain information. There'll be a time and a place that you can utilize that note-taking resource. There's also a link to our tools website and resources as well. So we will mention these as they come up throughout the session today.
I apologize, the formatting for website should be over to the right. So that slid. All right, so we're going to start off, as Megan said, talking a little bit more about getting that common vocabulary together. And let's take a closer look at some of the terms that we do encounter when we're dealing with augmentative and alternative communication. So let's start with AAC. So what is AAC? Just a quick kind of definition about this acronym. When we say AAC, many know it stands for augmentative and alternative communication, but some don't. I know I spent a few years always getting those A's confused. AAC can enhance or replace traditional forms of written or spoken communication. And it's not just for the students or kids or adults, for that matter, that are nonverbal. It also can benefit those that have frequent communication breakdowns, so enhancing their current communication. So it could just be that supplement, that augmenting of their communication. Maybe they're not always understood. Language on an AAC system can be represented in a variety of different ways, including using single words. It could have pre-programmed phrases, pre-programmed sentences, a keyboard with word prediction, or a combination of all of them. AAC tools are on a continuum. We know that we're going to go over a variety of things. On one end, you're going to have low tech, no tech type solutions, which is great for a vast majority. Having paper boards or picture cards, core boards you might hear about. On the other end, we're going to have those high tech systems. And within these systems, the displays can vary too. So just know that there's not just one size, not one layout that fits everybody. You might have a word-based system that also has the ability to use the keyboard with word prediction, or maybe you have one that doesn't need the symbol support, but maybe on some pages they do. So keeping that in mind, that we've got this variety out there for you. So then the next definition we want to look at is language. Let's refresh everybody's memories on our definition of language. It's represented by words that are either spoken or written, and language uses single words and combines them in a structured way. Each language across the world has a different way of structuring things, different words putting together, and so just know that those rules structure and govern them. When we're learning language, there are rules that govern the way we use them. So in English, we have a certain order that they go in, which then makes some AAC a little more difficult if we're trying to use those same rules to put sentences together, but those words translated don't go in the right order. Rules of language are primarily learned through exposure and practice, and if we think about our verbal kids that are learning language, that is definitely true, and it's true for our AAC learners. And then think about the language explosion stage that many toddlers go through. They hear a word used, they try to imitate it at a high rate of repetition, and eventually, over time, they try to use it and place it in the right way. So if we think of that, we know that whether it's a toddler or an adult, using language to help communicate more effectively helps us form those connections because we hear that, we try to imitate it, we try to get that feedback that we're doing it correctly. Our last definition we wanted to get on the same page is communication. And so this brings us, AAC language all brings us around to communication. It's the fundamental human need. Before a child can talk, they begin communicating through crying or gazing at something. They might coo or babble. We continue to communicate in a variety of ways throughout our lives with gestures, facial expressions, body language. It's all about the social interaction and the message that it represents. It's the sending and receiving of that information, taking turns with others. Communication expresses our thoughts and our ideas. It allows us to participate in and enjoy interactions with others, and it really does help us form those relationships that are so important to our quality of life.
As we move forward here with talking more about the start of the AAC consideration process and exploring what options you have available for augmentative tools and devices, I really wanted to share this tool with you as it's a really nice resource that PRC has put together to support you in this journey. The tool is www.exploreaac.com, and it really is an online resource that's going to walk you through getting started. This is a fantastic place to guide families that you might be supporting, as well as your professional teams, and it really complements the information that we'll be going over tonight and over the next 2 days here. You certainly can connect up to different learning modules through this tool, as well as dive deeper into some of the basics of AAC. My favorite place to visit here, again, is that you can read personal stories from device users on how AAC has really benefited them. So this website link, Heather just shared with you in the chat window, but it is www.exploreaac.com, and you can also kind of see the link there at the top of the page. So if you haven't checked it out before, I highly encourage you to take a look after tonight's session and use this as a nice little starting platform for you in your consideration process.
And you'll notice the little web icon in the bottom corner. So anytime you see that, you'll also find links and the URL in your handouts so that you can refer back to that too in case you're not catching it as we quickly talk about it.
So all of this background information really brings us to the why of why we're all gathered here today. We certainly appreciated hearing kind of what brought you here today, but I think overall, this Communication Bill of Rights pretty much sums up why we're all here today as well. Why do we have kind of this passion to learn more about AAC? So why are we diving deeper and spending our time talking about this? The Communication Bill of Rights was put together by the National Joint Committee for Communication Needs of Persons with Severe Disabilities. And I think it's a really powerful document, but a fantastic reminder for us to personally and professionally just take time to review it together tonight. If you haven't seen it before or looked at it lately, I'm going to read through the top portion of the Bill of Rights with you, and then we're going to look kind of to what's on the right side there to this adapted version. You'll see that little toolbox on the bottom of the slide here, and that is just your indicator that you have copies of both of these documents under that Materials tab in the pack of handouts here. But if I am connecting into the Bill of Rights document here, all people with a disability of any extent or severity have a basic right to affect, through communication, the conditions of their existence. Beyond this general right, a number of specific communication rights should be ensured in all daily interactions and interventions involving persons who have severe disabilities. To participate fully in communication interactions, each person has these fundamental rights. And for this part, I just want you guys to kind of peek over to the right. And if it's hard for you to read those, we'll look at some of these together. This particular document was put together by Kate Ahern, and it is kind of a symbol-supported version of the Bill of Rights that we see there on the left. So everybody has the right to be given real choices, to say no, to refuse and reject choices, to ask for what they want, to share their feelings, to be heard and responded to, in parentheses, even when the answer is no. Natural consequences there, right?
Yep.
To have and use my AAC system all the time. To be taught how to communicate, that's a big one. To be communicated with in a sensitive manner. To be spoken with and not about. To be treated with respect and dignity. To be a full and equal member of my community. To have my speech system in working order and to have a backup. Ask about and know about my schedule and my world, and to ask for and get attention and interaction. So we just wanted to take time to review this Bill of Rights because we feel like it really does sum up kind of the why of why we are here tonight and kind of what we're talking about as we move forward through the rest of the workshop series. So your key takeaway here, and if you notice at the bottom, we're kind of referencing again that notes handout. So you do have a handout under the materials tab, and there is a placeholder if you're a note taker like Heather and I are. There is a little placeholder for you to capture these key takeaways and kind of reflect on this for a minute. So everybody has the right to communicate verbally, augmented, to support them, or in an alternative format.
And I did see a question come up. We did only include the version of the Communication Bill of Rights from the Joint Committee, as that one is out there. Kate Ahern's adapted version is available on the internet. You can Google it and look at it that way. I've seen it on Pinterest, that sort of thing, but we had not gotten permission from her directly to include it in our slides and stuff, or in our handouts. So we wanted to refer it as an option out there. There's lots of adapted versions out there as well with different symbol sets. So just wanted you to see that there were options, or you could create one that's similar. So thank you for asking that question.
Thanks. Sorry about the confusion there, guys.
No problem. All right, we'll give you a second to jot that down on your takeaways. And then we're going to dive into those myths and beliefs.
All right, so oftentimes, Heather and I will be out in the field working with school teams or families or professionals. And really from the conversations that we're having with these individuals, we do hear that, we hear about some of the real barriers to obtaining AAC, going through that process. What are the barriers that get in the way of somebody actually acquiring that communication device? There really continues to be so many different beliefs floating around out there about who can benefit from AAC. So what does using AAC do for an individual's verbal skills? Lots of myths. And we just kind of wanted to dispel some of these and share the research, the research, excuse me, that corresponds to that myth tonight. So we're going to kick it off. We've got 3 for you, and we'll kick it off here with the very first one. As we go through these, we definitely want you guys to interact with that chat window. So I'll read the myth out loud, but we would love to hear from you, especially because we have kind of people attending from all over the United States and beyond, I believe I saw. We just want to hear from you. Is this a myth that you've heard in your setting as a parent or professional in a school, private clinic? And what are your thoughts about it? And if you are hearing this myth, who are you hearing it from? Do you think it's accurate, not accurate? So let me read the first one to you, and we shall go from there. So introducing AAC will reduce an individual's motivation to improve natural speech and will hinder language development, including the development of social language skills. AAC should only be introduced after the ability to use natural speech has been completely rolled out. What do you guys think about this one? Feel free to use that chat window and let us know. Is this something that you've heard before? Myth.
We hear it all the time. Definitely false. People are hearing the hinders language a lot. Parents
Right.
expressing that at the gut level. Yep. I was going to say, I remember getting asked this question a lot.
Exactly. Yep. Somebody says I hear it all the time from family members, SLPs, ABA therapists. Yep. Somebody said they just had that conversation with parents to educate them. Sometimes that fear is real, right? It's like, if we go in this direction, are we giving up on something else?
Well, we don't want to rule this out. Yep. Awesome. Thank
So
you
not
all
true.
for
Thanks for your
engaging.
feedback there. Yeah.
Oh, principals and
So
doctors even. Yep.
exactly. It's like, so what does using this device exactly mean for this individual that has some communication needs, right? So when we really look at the research findings here, we're summarizing them for you in this document so that this can be a place you can come for future to help dispel and share this information with folks that you serve. So to summarize what our findings are here is that AAC did not affect the motivation to use natural speech, and it indeed can improve it. The interventions that include speech generating devices increase spontaneous output and the use of novel utterances. And AAC is a tool that can be used to decrease challenging behaviors. So thinking
I was just
about,
going to say the link at the bottom links you to the ASHA portion of the website that has these myths along with the research articles. And those, again, are all linked in the handout.
I just saw somebody's comment here. They're flashing so quickly. I love that you guys are engaging with us. So thank you. It makes this a lot more fun and we learn from each other this way, right? So, so this, this particular myth really makes me think of a young person that I was supporting. I was supporting this gentleman who was using probably like 1 to 2 word combinations. His intelligibility was maybe about 50% with familiar listeners. And he was really becoming more and more frustrated that people weren't understanding him. And so as a result of people not understanding him and communication breaking down, he was really starting to completely withdraw from things that he maybe was passionate, maybe we could even say passionate about before. And he was also really changing his behavior. So he was starting to avoid different social situations where maybe in the past would have been a social situation where communication would have broken down and he wouldn't have really had a way to fix it. And he really was starting to avoid talking with unfamiliar communication partners at all. So like stop calling to schedule his appointments, stop calling to schedule his transportation. So over time, he started to get pretty isolated as a result of where he was at with his communication and this level of kind of unintelligibility. He did go on to go through that AAC consideration process. received a communication device, and really started to see that it expanded his ability to communicate. The first thing I think that was noted was that he really started to produce longer utterances when he was communicating with the device. So if communication broke down before, he was maybe using, short phrases to try to repair it. Where using the device, he was able to produce that longer utterance and keep his communication partner kind of on the path to understanding. So in place of those 1 to 2 word verbal utterances, he's really expanding it into sentences using different functions of speech. I think one of the big things too here was that he was also trying to imitate the message verbally that he would hear on that communication device, which was awesome because I think what it helped for him was that it helped him gain some of that confidence back that he had lost over years of communication breaking down, and people not understanding him. So definitely through the use of his communication device, his overall frustration decreased and his ability to communicate, but also his motivation to communicate definitely increased, which was really the beautiful thing. It's been probably now about 4 years, and he's no longer really needing to use his device on a daily basis as like his primary method of communication. He's really relying more on that verbal speech. But instead, he's using the device as kind of a backup to repair those messages that were not understood verbally. So if communication now breaks down, he's going to use his device to repair it and can do so in kind of full, using robust vocabulary that really matches his ability and skill level. So this individual, he's really a case where he had that verbal speech, right? Because sometimes we hear if you have verbal language, you might not be a good candidate for AAC. But for him, it absolutely was the tool that led to him having more successful communication. So when we are looking back at myth number 1, we can officially say that this myth is totally busted.
Gotta love it. Let's be trendy. It's busted.
It's a fun line, I'm gonna admit. I'm
I
gonna
know.
admit that.
Right? I know. And to think that the myth is still out there, but that's why we're here. Let's dispel these.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the myth is definitely real, right? All right, myth number 2 that we have for you. Young children are not ready for AAC and will not require AAC until they reach school age. Is this a myth? Have you heard it before in your communities? How do you feel about it? What do you think about it? Who are you hearing it from? We'll give you some time to kind of fill that chat window for us. Seeing lots of
Everybody's agreeing
falses
it's a
and
myth. Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, it can be introduced. I like that with toddlers. 0 to 3 SLP. Yes.
People are busting this. They're busting it.
I love this one. Communication begins at day 1 of a child's life. Can I give you a round of applause, Maureen, for that one? I like that phrase.
Yep.
Like we said, we're hearing it from the moment we enter the world.
I think you're totally right here, Elaine, that, they need to communicate before school starts.
And think about all the
Exactly.
behaviors before school starts.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's take a look at these research findings. So early implementation of AAC can aid in the development of natural speech and language, right? And it also can increase vocabulary for children ages 3 years and younger. That's a really important one to keep in our pockets and our toolkits here. And AAC use with preschool age children has been associated with increased use of multi-symbol utterances and the development of grammar. Yeah, you're so welcome for sharing this research. We get these questions a lot also. And do you guys ever feel like professionally you kind of know the answer, but you're sort of like, point me to the right place that I can share this information with other people? So
Yep.
happy to take the time to go through these tonight so you kind of know what your resources are. All right, Heather, I'll have you. So I actually was supporting a student that was in an early childhood special ed program and was starting to explore those AAC options. And this kiddo's team was really starting to look at AAC because his speech intelligibility was also poor, and frequent communication breakdowns were happening. But really, what was starting to happen is a lot of increased behaviors for this little guy, right? So his communication became behaviors because those were what was kind of most widely understood and effective for him. So the student was, really attempting one-word verbal approximations, but really he was kind of stuck in that requesting, right? So lots of requesting favorite toys, requesting favorite activities, and kind of just at that one word level. So um, because he had that low intelligibility and his communication interactions were not super successful and they weren't meeting his needs, those behaviors really became kind of the focus of where people were putting their attention of like, what can we do to reduce these behaviors? Maybe not realizing that they were connected to his inability to communicate. So this particular team went through the consideration process and AAC started to be implemented. And the team would hear that the student actually verbally was starting to repeat what he had heard on the device. And over time, his verbal speech that was highly unintelligible and not meeting his needs was truly starting to be more frequent, that we'd hear the verbalizations and with such greater clarity. So I think for this student here, the biggest game for him was that using the device, he was able to expand his communicative functions and really went from being able to request with a high rate of communication breakdown using one single word, a thing, an activity or a specific toy, to being highly successful requesting still, but also started commenting and talking about, this is probably the biggest one, talking about his feelings and talking about his family that he so loved and wanted to share stories about mom and his pets at home. And for the first time, he really had a more effective way of refusing or negating. So look at that expansion within what he was able to do with the communication device compared to what he was successful doing verbally. So the expansion of those functions was really the biggest part here for him and allowed him to be successful in really producing novel communication, right? So putting those thoughts and words together in his own way to really express who he is and what he likes. So certainly we saw that this reduced his behaviors and definitely improved his ability to communicate. He really did continue to kind of go forward mimicking words that he heard on his device. And it supported his ability to segment his speech, improving that overall intelligibility. So that also definitely improved. Now with his verbal speech, he's making, I would say probably like 2-word approximations, has much improved intelligibility, and continues to use his device and his speech to repair communication breakdowns. But overall, I think the really exciting thing for him is that MLU has really been enhanced and increased significantly beyond that single word level. So this myth, I feel like I need a big stamper, is officially busted.
Or at least sound effect, right?
Yeah, we need it. You need that for myth number 3. You got to add the sound effect for me, Heather.
Sounds good.
All right. Moving on. Let's take a look at this third one here. Oh, I like someone's comment here. I'm just trying to keep pace with the chat window. Somebody had commented that sometimes the behaviors are the student's way of communicating. That makes so much sense. I think you're exactly right that it's more universally understood maybe sometimes than their speech might be, that it's getting their attention. People are helping problem solve when they see that behavior. So yeah, thanks for that. All right, let's take a peek at the third myth here. So prerequisite skills such as understanding of cause and effect and showing communicative intent must be demonstrated before AAC should be considered. Individuals with cognitive deficits are not able to learn to use AAC. So what do you guys think about this, about prerequisite skills and understanding of cause and effect must be demonstrated before we can start with AAC? Some are saying myth. Some are saying, well, maybe parts of it, right? Maybe they need that intent part. Could be a
I love
couple.
the combination.
Mm-hmm.
Making you think. We are making you think.
Yeah.
All right, not to access low tech or no tech. Okay.
Somebody said, I believe this is a myth. However, I do believe that these prerequisite skills need to be considered in choosing the type of the device. I like that.
I know it's a myth, but I also know that there's the struggle to implement and introduce. Very, very accurate statements.
Right.
Awesome. All right, let's see what the research says, Megan.
All right. Let's take a peek here, guys. So the research findings tell us that measures of pre-communicative cognitive ability may be invalid for some populations, and research suggests that impaired cognition does not preclude communication. Development of language skills can lead to functional cognitive gains. An AAC intervention for complex communication needs helps develop functional communication skills, promote cognitive development, provides a foundation for literacy development, and improves social communication. Wow. Right? So we had some mixed feedback on this one, which I think is good because it does kind of make us think. I know somebody had kind of commented about the professional challenge of all of this, and I find that to be so true myself. Somebody had said that this is kind of their goal area when we're talking about um, those prerequisites. Like, how do you let those prerequisites go, right? I think anyone working in AAC has had to have their own process of growth in this area. I think like anytime I see something like this, I picture a kid. I don't know if anybody else is like that, but you picture that kid where you're like, oh, I experienced that with this particular kiddo, and because I went through this journey with him, I'm just never going to forget that kid. So I'm going to tell you about this kid when we're talking about kind of this idea of prerequisites here. But I was supporting this school team that was really starting to question if AAC maybe was for a particular student, and they called us in to provide support for the device side of things. And we were kind of circulating this conversation of this idea of prerequisites. So is this student, truly ready for a device? And this particular kiddo was a fifth grader, and he did have a diagnosis of a cognitive disability. And school was kind of sharing that he was not consistently using paper symbols to communicate in class. So therefore, they were kind of feeling like he didn't really have the skills to be successful using a device because this paper symbol option that they had been trialing wasn't going the way that they thought it might, to kind of show that he had those readiness skills for the device. So the support he was given really included specific symbols or different words that would be used mostly to support activities. So like if we're going to be reading or if we're going to be doing this activity with blocks, here are the words that would go with this activity. Or if we're doing this in the classroom, here are the words that we would use. So mostly nouns and mostly specific to activities, but not really a lot of those what we'd call kind of like a high frequency words that those little words, right? So he wasn't using a lot of those little words that we know can help kids grow from a single word communicator to using phrases to using sentences. But really, his vocabulary here in this tool was super limited because he didn't have a way to really let his team know that what he wanted was not available on this paper symbol system that he had. So he was requesting maybe lots of different things. So probably toys or activities, but not really a whole lot of anything else was happening there with his language or his speech here. So when he was, we kind of did some circles here and kind of came back that, we need to try different options. So when he was really given the opportunity to access a device, he certainly was able to explore a lot more vocabulary than what he had before, because before it was kind of pre-made by somebody else that was guesstimating what words he might need available. And if those words that were available were not motivating, he might have not been motivated to communicate them. So using this device, he was able to just explore a ton more vocabulary and get really beyond just those specific words that were activity specific. So he was a lot more interested in communicating with the speech generating the device than he was with pointing to these paper symbols. So using the device, he really started to use language in a very novel way and get beyond that stage of requesting. He was able to choose the words he wanted to say instead of just choosing from kind of this pre-selected group of words. And the most exciting part is that people really figured out who this guy was, what he was interested in, who he was, what made him tick. People were able to learn a lot more about him. And because he had a bigger vocabulary that went beyond just kind of the nouns, they were truly able to understand what he knew and what he needed as well, which was the fantastic part about that. So when I think about this myth number 3, this guy just really sticks in my mind here. But we will
He
say,
busted it.
yeah, exactly. He's busted that myth. And you did not give me, any audio feedback on that,
Sorry.
Heather. So there we go. So myth number 3 is officially busted.
And I think if we look at it as a tool, right? That's the key thing, that it's not going to fix things. It's not this magic wand that, all of a sudden makes everything different, but it's a tool and we teach it and it will help with those things.
Exactly. So knowing that there are no prerequisites to AAC, we can really look at how language skills typically develop. And we can see that they don't develop sequentially, right? We make gains and then we kind of fall back a little on that ladder. And then we make a bigger gain and then we kind of fall back. And things don't always land in a perfect, neat, and tidy order. If we're waiting for somebody to master a skill before trying AAC, we are really missing out on that valuable time that we can use to continue to develop language and really that time needed to teach language.
And good question, Maureen. Is it wrong to write in reports that they demonstrate those prerequisite skills that enable them to be successful with a device like cause and effect, symbol to object? It's always good to look at those things, but on the flip side, is it going to be something that if you're saying it's an emerging skill that it might, if you handed him to another student or another team, they would say, oh, no, he can't, he's not capable of this. So I think kind of like when we're doing any standardized testing, we know that it's not based off of that particular cohort of students. Is it okay to say that they have, a cognitive level here when we know that those cognitive test scores aren't based off of our complex communicators? So I think knowing it, and tomorrow when we talk about tools, I think that might help as well to think of other things that we can look at too. But it's definitely good to observe it and talk about what's been tried.
So your key takeaway here is that age and cognitive ability certainly are not prerequisites to use during the consideration process for AAC, and using a communication device would not impede verbal communication skills from developing. We really presume that the individual is capable of learning, and we know that it's not going to impede that speech development. So age and cognitive ability are just not going to be prerequisites to this process.
and similar to what Maureen was getting at, and that might guide what features we're looking for and what tools or access modes, but it shouldn't ever be a nope, we can't do it.
Exactly.
All right. We have one more section of great information, and we're going to talk about communicative competencies. All right, so communicative competencies are looked at for a variety of reasons. They can help us guide what we look at with AAC options for our students. They also provide a framework for writing intervention goals and determining the effectiveness of the AAC tools that are being recommended. So, not necessarily, again, those prerequisites, but it is a good way to gauge. Have we made gains? Are we moving towards independence? We aren't going to go too deeply into them, but we did want to share with you what they are and how they can help you with the consideration process. And there is a link here on the ASHA website, and then just a definition from Janice Light and her team that they give us that communicative competence is the individual's ability to freely express their ideas and their feelings to a variety of listeners, and it provides a means to achieve those personal, professional, educational, vocational, you name it, all those goals. And here is another way of looking at the definition from ASHA that really highlights, again, the communication is a right. And we all should be able to communicate freely for those different reasons with different people whenever we want to. And it ties back to what Megan showed us on that Communication Bill of Rights. Based off of Janice Light's work, there are 5 areas that we consider when we look at communication competency. Linguistic competence, operational competence, strategic, social, and then psychosocial emotional is often one that's not looked at as much, but it's just as important. Maybe not during our consideration process initially, but when we look at how motivated a student is to communicate, that might play in down here, or that overarching theme of, what is going to make them want to continue to communicate. So those top 4 are usually what we see most often. So we'll go through each of these just to give you a little more information about them. So first, you want to look at the student's knowledge of language and symbols. Make note of what they've had access to in the classroom, visual schedules, picture exchange. Are they using low-tech boards? Any of those things, and how they are using spoken or written language. And so we can have those things where we know that they are maybe familiar with certain symbol sets, or maybe they are used to, 1 and 2 word, handing you a picture for something or just pointing. So we can talk about what that is during our consideration process, during our assessment. The second one is the operational competency, or the technical aspects of AAC. This includes motor skills, so how they're accessing it. I know I saw comments about using switches, or are we using a key guard? Do we need some button timings to help us access those buttons? Do we need a larger screen? Do we need something smaller because we need it to be portable and easy to take with us? Are they able to turn it on and off themselves, or do they need help? Can they put it to sleep or wake it up? What about charging the system? Do they let you know that it needs to be charged? Or do we, as the communication partners, need to be the ones that check on that? Do they know how to navigate pages independently, or do we need to verbally or give them a visual support to navigate those pages, to dig deeper, scan through, and find different things on other pages? The third competency is strategic. Strategic competency has to do with using a variety of features that are available within a system to communicate in the most effective way possible. So again, if there are certain phrases that are highly needed quickly, can we have those pre-programmed versus, yes, most of the time we want individual words so we can have novel utterances and we can, generate really, detailed sentences. But being able to say, I don't know, I use this communication device to help me talk, I need help. Those kinds of things we want quickly. So those might be pre-programmed buttons on your device. If they use word prediction, great, but Again, it might be quicker to have something pre-done. So we might want a combination, or maybe they use the keyboard for some and single words for others. Um, Also, do they use screen gestures for frequently used words or phrases? Many systems, including PRC's Accent and Saltillo's NovaChat, have the ability to use the screen gestures. We won't get into those details, but you can ask your consultant for more information to, tap the screen with 3 fingers and I need help, please, and have that pre-done, or say, give their name if they need to quickly tell somebody their name. Are they letting you know if a word's not on their device and it needs to be added? Great. That's a huge skill to work towards. It doesn't start that way, but I love when I've had students bring their device to me and like point at something and be like, it's not on here. All of these things continue to allow them to communicate for more reasons and more effectively over time. Would a student ask a communication partner to write or type messages to aid in understanding? Sometimes they might ask you to write it down, and I've had that combination. So yeah, but it definitely can be, something we teach. Again, we know it doesn't happen overnight, but it might be something that they teach. Or if they have good reading skills, I've had plenty of students who ask to have messages written down. The fourth competency is social. We want to take it into consideration how social communication is going to impact them. Do they know who to communicate with in different situations? Do they know how to gain somebody's attention? Do they know about different social niceties and how to communicate them? Do we have different things in here for saying hi to a teacher versus saying, hey, what's up to a peer? Those things are important too. Often I hear, well, it's such a formal language sometimes in a system, so we should have some phrases that are more peer-based. We're usually working on those skills throughout the day and making note of how your complex communicator already does these things and what they're not able to do, so that we can consider that in the different options of AAC when you start trying different things to see if one maybe lends itself more to helping with those social things, or the strategic or the linguistic. And then that last one of psychosocial or emotional, it has to do with the ability to handle communication breakdowns and how to fix them. We know this is a later developing skill. It also has to do with how motivated they are to communicate when they don't understand, or when they're not understood. Do they notice when you're not understanding them, or do we have to let them know, hey, I didn't understand you. Can you tell me with your device? It's definitely an important competency, but it usually comes after a system's in place, not during the consideration process, as I mentioned earlier. And so keeping it in mind as you consider the process of getting AAC, so that you know, is it in here? Is this something that they seem motivated by, engaged with, want to use, and start to understand how to use it in those different situations, can be really helpful. In your um, On the screen, there is a link to our Saltillo chat corner. And so you can find this from the RAST resources. They have a great online presence with information and resources. And so it's just one way that you can go and take a peek at those different competencies. It describes some of those different things to look for, as well as in your tools handout with that toolbox. Here's one where we kind of put some of those common ones together that you might be thinking about during this consideration process or assessing your students. It's not an exhaustive list. There are many empty spots on here that you could write in other skills that they may need to do, or that you already have observed them to do to help improve over the course of considering a device or trialing a device. Considering these skills now can help us narrow down features on devices that we want to try later. So tomorrow, when we talk about more tools for assessing and figuring out what might be a good feature for our students, this is just kind of that first step. It's a great starting point to look at those. And again, you can look at it over time and measure some of those progress. Are we starting to see some more skills showing up? Looking back at it after trials and interventions, you can track what worked well and what maybe didn't work well. Oh, good. I'm glad you find that list helpful. I'm always one, if I can see it, it jogs my memory like, oh yeah, we could look at that. Or, oh, they already do this. Now we can maybe look at this. And again, it's not a hierarchy, so don't feel like you have to go top to bottom, but just seeing what are they currently doing and what can we work on. So on your notes handout, there's a spot to take away from this section. And we want the key takeaway from here that all communicators, verbal or nonverbal, have the right to express their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings, and they should be able to do this with a variety of people in a variety of settings, which again, if you've done funding for a device, you know that that's something insurance is looking for, that they use it for a variety of things with a variety of people in a variety of places. So know that that communicative right and those competencies really help to achieve that. And that brings us to our next step. So what's next? We just wanted to give you one more summary of those key takeaways that we've talked about today. So to summarize our session, we've unraveled the basics around AAC. We dispelled some of those myths that often hinder us from even considering or looking at AAC options for kids or students. And so thinking about the students you have, or if there's anybody in particular, thinking about, do you feel like they might benefit from AAC? Are you ready to keep moving forward with the consideration process? And if so, thinking about them and what you might consider next, we've looked at those reasons why they have the right to communicate and how we need to start figuring out what systems might be a good fit, which leads us to part 2 is tomorrow. With so many options out there, we know there's apps, there's devices, I mean, you name it, there's tons out there. So how do you know what to try with a child or a student? So part 2, we're going to talk about some possible tools that are available to you out there to start gathering that information, to start assessing those skills and compile it together to look at their communication, their language, and narrow the list down of different systems that you could try out. And then part 3 on Wednesday is once you've started to gather all that information, now we need to match those needs to AAC system features out there. And so we'll discuss hardware and software considerations for that feature matching on Wednesday, as well as how those would be matched to possible systems. And we'll look a little closer at PRC devices and Saltillo devices, just to give you an example of how those features might match to those systems. And so we do have a few minutes. We did awesome today, Megan, with our timing. Feel free to add questions into the chat window. If you aren't able to attend any of these, we will have them recorded and up on our websites. And so just know that that's a possibility. And then if you have questions afterwards, reach out to your regional consultants. And you can find the contact info for them if you're not familiar with your PRC or your Saltillo consultant by going to exploreaac.com and click on Find Your Representative. And I just wanted to scroll back if there were any questions. I'm so glad people thought this was helpful and good information. We agree. This is why we wanted to put it together. As Megan said, we hear these questions a lot. And so we thought, let's put it together and talk about it for a variety of people. Jennifer, your question, the certificate of attendance will come a couple hours after the session ends. You'll get an email and there'll be a link that says link to materials. Oh, good.
We look forward to working with you guys over the next 2 days and really appreciated everybody's participation today. It certainly helps to keep it light and fresh so we can all kind of walk through the resources together. So thanks.
Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you tomorrow and or on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your day.